Welcome back to Responding Positively to Behaviors. In this subject, we are going to talk about the neuropsychiatric symptoms of behaviors. I'll give you a definition of that. It sounds like a big word, I know, but it actually can help you identify and respond positively to behaviors, and I'll share tips and stories. Let's get started. As usual, I'm going to go through housekeeping to get us started, and then we'll continue from there. So, you already know I use the term elderly parent or elderly parents. Substitute that with whoever you're caring for. Look at the outline for this module, print the slides, participate with me. The ellipses, the dots in the slides are purposeful. So let's talk about the objectives of the neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia. At the end of this section, you should be able to recognize how to respond to behaviors that are annoying, distressing, and those that don't make a difference. You should be able to build a toolbox of positive responses for yourself to respond to behaviors from elderly parents, and you should be able to share these responses with your brothers and sisters and with other people who may not have your experience, who may not be as familiar with how your parents respond. One of the things that I say is so important is to learn to laugh and love. Laughter and joy are essential in caregiving situations. They help us survive. And learning to respond to the behaviors of Alzheimer's and dementia, it's accomplished through experience. It's important to laugh at ourselves when we make mistakes or when we accidentally cause the behavior of an elderly parent and we think, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? I knew that would happen. There's no one right or one wrong way to respond to behaviors. Successful responses are learned through trial and error. In my 20-plus year as a care manager, a guardian, a power of attorney, I learned something new each day. I made mistakes, but I did this when working with my clients and with individuals in the healthcare system. We all learn from each other. And your days like mine, they will be filled with challenges, laughter, learning to love, and great satisfaction that you are helping someone, an elderly parent, someone that you love. As I supported my clients diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, I played out different scenarios in my mind. So for example, if X happens, then I respond with Y, and multiple scenarios I planned out. Because of the thousands of experiences that I had, I was fortunate to create my own, I call it a caregiver survival skills toolkit that I used. So when my staff would come to me and they would give me examples, I would say, well, in that situation, this is what I would do. Or in this situation, this is what I do. How did you respond? How might you have responded differently? There's no substitute for experience. Caring for an elderly parent with memory loss, it does benefit from constant learning, laughter, being kind to ourselves, and love. We have to laugh at ourselves, and it's essential. Otherwise, as caregivers, we cannot survive positively. And I'm going to share a story called Me and Martha and By the Grace of God. This is Martha and this is me. Martha was one of my first guardianship clients, and she came to me in a rather unusual situation, but as I found out later, not such an unusual situation. She was married. It was her second marriage. She left her first marriage because her husband was an alcoholic, and she basically abandoned 3 kids because she couldn't stay in the relationship. He was beating her. She didn't want to let the children know how bad the situation was, so she left. So years later, here she is married to a second husband, and over those years, her children never forgave her for leaving. And they would call and visit occasionally, but not frequently. Martha's husband was an Air Force colonel, more than 20 years in the Air Force, had a pension. They were well-to-do, fortunately, because of him, and he had cancer. His cancer, by the time I met both of them, was so progressed that he was on hospice care at the end of life, about ready to die. Martha had Alzheimer's, and she had no idea what was going on. She didn't understand that he was sick. She didn't understand that he was dying. Her main comfort came from two West Highland Terriers named Missy and Sissy, who I called little terrors. They ran around the house, but Martha loved them to death. I became involved in the situation because of Adult Protective Services. And over time, I became Martha's guardian. Her husband passed away. Martha was moderately well behaved. And I say this because there would be times when, as you know, if you would try to force her to bathe or do something like that, she would become extremely upset. But we learned that those little dogs and music, especially country music, especially Hank Williams, especially other people, would settle Martha down so that we could do almost anything for her. She was the love of my life, one of the loves of my life. It was such a pleasure to take care of her. And very interesting and I'll tell you this because it may come up in your family in the estate planning and the wills. So she was estranged from her children, right? During the time that I was with her, she was able to talk about her children and tell me what happened and the issues with the husband who was the alcoholic. And when she was young, she was placed in an orphanage because her parents couldn't take care of her. So when she died, she wanted her money, any remaining money, to go to this orphanage of sisters who took care of her when she was a child. So Martha passes away. About a year after Martha's death, I get a call from an attorney saying, Martha's children are contesting her will. What do you know about her will? And I smiled and I said, I know a lot about Martha's will. Because one of the things that I became very good at doing with people's permission was, in this case, I was out with Martha for an entire day. We went to doctor appointments. We were laughing. We were having a good time. And I had a little recorder with me. And I said, Martha, can I just record some conversations about what we're talking about today? She said, oh, honey, yes. She had this beautiful Southern voice. She talked about the story about her children and her will and where she wanted her money to go and the fact that she did not want her children to inherit a penny because, in a sense, they abandoned her and never came back after she left. I gave that recording to the attorney. And as you can imagine, what Martha wanted to have happen to her money did, and her children didn't get anything. I even had conversations with Martha's children when she was at the stages of passing away, and they could not forgive her. They were not interested. Sometimes these situations happen in families, and I want to make you aware of them and how sometimes professionals like myself get involved in these situations. And family members will get very angry with us because we're doing what the person wanted, because I did what Martha wanted. But again, I wouldn't have had it any other way. So let's keep going. The neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia. So let's talk about the definition of neuropsychiatric because it's a big medical speak term. A neuropsychiatric disorder is a medical speak term for a range of conditions that involve both neurology and psychiatry. So it's not only the memory part, so the cognitive part, but also the depression, the anxiety, the behaviors. And so with this in mind, I am sharing a document with you that I found years ago in my research that has helped many caregivers, people that I have presented to, groups, families, even professionals. This document, if you choose to print it, read it, and use it, will help you recognize, understand, and respond positively to a wide variety of behaviors related to Alzheimer's and dementia. I found the document about 10 years ago when I was searching for guests for my weekly radio program, The Caring Generation. The results in part are from the Cache County study on memory, health, and aging. It was initiated in the state of Utah in 1995. It ran through 2013. This study contributed to this document that was created by the Alzheimer's Association that they willingly give out. The problem is, I find nobody finds the documents. The document is in the section for this module. It's called the Neuropsychiatric Symptoms of Dementia. It is truly one of the best manuals that I have found for information about how to respond and understand anxiety and other behaviors. So let me do a quick review of the information in the document, and I'll share a couple more stories. So the document in section 1 talks about general behaviors, so common behaviors, many of which we've talked about, many of which you likely have already seen. Section 2 gives the reasons why those behaviors might be happening. And it's done in chart form. So if you look at the chart, it may say, elderly parent pacing, and then have 5 items under there for why your parent might be pacing. Section 3 is called interventions. Intervention is another one of those medical speak terms. It basically means, how do you respond to the behavior? And again, it's in chart form. Section 4 has all the references and resources that were used to compile the document. If you like research, it's there. You can look all of them up. The next section, the last section, shares information about the Alzheimer's Association, who created the document. 25 years ago, I completed my first educational program through the Alzheimer's Association. If you're new to memory loss, I highly recommend contacting your local Alzheimer's Association. They may have some educational programs. They may have some courses that are available. Some of them are very basic, but if you are new or if a family member knows nothing about Alzheimer's or dementia, they are wonderful. The Alzheimer's Association is a great resource for all caregivers, all people with memory loss. This document that you're going to print off, that you're going to look at, it does have a lot of medical speak terms. It may appear to be more targeted to healthcare professionals, but the information, if you choose to look at it and think about it, is going to be valuable for your care situation. I recommend sharing the document with your family members who may be in denial. Share it with family members who may refuse to accept how a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia can possibly result in these types of behaviors. And most importantly, one of my favorite questions that I ask people who talk to me about Alzheimer's disease is, what difference does it make? You see this screaming baby in the bathtub. So I purposely put that photo there to illustrate the difference between annoying and harmful behaviors. A screaming baby is not harmful. They are upset. An agitated parent with dementia who is screaming is not harmful. They are upset. Behaviors can be considered normal, annoying, threatening, or harmful. How do you, as a family member, know the difference? So here's some tips. If the behavior doesn't harm anybody, including the person, but it might be annoying, like this baby screaming, behavior is not really a problem because you can find a way to address it to stop the screaming or the crying. If that behavior is simple to redirect, it doesn't happen a lot, it's not a problem. However, if that behavior results in distress or harm to your elderly parent, then you really do want a plan to reduce or eliminate the behavior. Again, those plans are in the document in this section, the neuropsychiatric symptoms of behavior. Physical aggression or self-harm falls into this category. One of the questions that I always ask you to ask yourself is, what difference does it make? And by this, I mean, what if your elderly parent calls a sandwich a donut? Is any harm done? No. Then don't correct your elderly parent, because this type of correcting, this type of trying to orient your parent to your world is what causes the agitation and the behaviors in many instances. Left to themselves, sitting watching TV in a calm environment, you're probably not going to have any behaviors. It comes through interactions. It comes through outside noise. So ask yourself, what difference does it make? It's the difference between having to be right or living in a world where the behavior of your elderly parent is causing problems. A soft voice and a soft touch solve a lot of behaviors. The importance of a familiar voice and a comforting touch can provide reassurance and reduce behaviors. For many of my clients, the idea of redirecting a situation, that means changing a subject, going to a quiet room, sitting down, taking a detour like we talked about in one of the prior sections, holding a hand, giving them a hug, giving them a cookie, can provide reassurance and calm them down. Other ideas. Record a family member's voice that they are familiar with, and at times during the day, play the recording. It can be a pleasant diversion for your elderly parent who might be a little upset. Your family members, they can record stories that might be remembered. They can read a book. They can read a short story. And the interesting thing is, if your parent does have advanced memory loss, you could play this every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and your parent won't remember that they just heard it. It's a beautiful thing. You could also ask family members to call at a certain time of day when agitation might be happening to provide a diversion. Hearing the voice of a familiar family member can be very comforting. It's especially relevant if your parent sundowns and is looking for mom or a daughter regularly at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock every day. Playing an audio file of a recognized family member's voice may resolve that concerns. There are also tactile projects, and that means projects that can be felt or touched with the hands that can provide a positive diversion. If your elderly parent knitted, for example, and they can still remember how to knit, give them knitting needles and a ball of yarn and let them knit away. Doesn't matter if they're making anything productive, it's just the idea of using your hands and feeling things. There's also the idea of creating a lap quilt or an activity box. So, for example, a lap quilt would be for a client who used to sew. You take a piece of cloth, you sew some buttons on there, maybe put a zipper in, a couple spools of yarn, some different types of fabrics like felt and silk and something else. So it's something that goes in their lap that they can just touch and play with, and it diverts their attention. Other themes can be based on boxes. So maybe you have maybe somebody with a gardener, and you get a box and you put some seeds in there, and you've got some dirt and some gardening tools that they can work with, or they can go outside and do that. So many of these types of activities, believe it or not, are outlined in the document, The Neuropsychiatric Behaviors of Dementia. I highly recommend that you make use of the information. It is supported by years and years of research. So how do you use all of this? The information in these slide decks and in the neuropsychiatric symptoms of dementia is valuable, beneficial, helpful. If you talk to your brothers and sisters and you all take an active interest in being proactive to try these recommendations, this information will shortcut your learning curve. It'll shortcut and lower your frustration, your anxiety, and as the result, the care of your elderly parent will become better, less stressful. You want to identify behaviors, look for specific solutions, ask your family members to participate so that everybody's doing the same thing. That way you're not the only person trying these interventions, and you're not the only person bearing all of that responsibility. Be very clear with your family members about your expectations and the importance for everybody to learn about Alzheimer's and dementia and what can probably happen in the future. When everyone in a family can be realistic and have a clear picture of the situation, the family consensus is more likely. You will not have family disagreements. You will not be going to court for silly things. With a diagnosis of memory loss and other chronic diseases, the more educated we can become as patients, as caregivers, the more proactive, the more engaged. It is so essential to having a good outcome. Being proactive also allows planning, like we've discussed, and fewer upsetting and unexpected situations, which we all want. So let's summarize this. Behaviors and hands-on care, they are the two most challenging and distressing areas for caregivers of loved ones who have memory loss. Learn as much about all aspects of memory loss, about care to reduce your stress. Keep trying different responses until you find one that can work. Trial and error is part of being a caregiver. If you feel you are struggling, talk to other caregivers in a support group. Create your own caregiver support toolkit. That can be meditation, it can be a 10-minute walk, it can be calling a friend, listening to music. You have to find ways to support your stress. And when you talk to other caregivers, they will understand. They will empathize where your family members may not, which is a terrible thing. Again, read the deck included in this section. Try the suggestions until you find ones that work. Also, again, involve other family members, other people as much as you can. Other people benefit your elderly parents. They're seeing someone besides you, and they can give you a much needed break. Most of all, be kind and patient with yourselves as you go through this journey. It is unlike any other. Seek and accept help. Be proactive. Learn how to love and talk to your elderly parents with dementia. So important. I'm Pamela D Wilson. Thank you for being with me for this segment. I'll see you again in another webinar.